Innovating theories, I'm coming with something new.
I'm pleased to have Rebecca Homkes, professor at the London Business School, professor of strategy at the London Business School, with us to talk about her brand new book called Survive, Reset, and Thrive. SRT is how I remember it. And this is an amazing book talking about strategy in today's fast-moving, turbulent, technologically enhanced world. Rebecca, welcome. So glad you're here with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Karim. Glad to be here.
So what motivated you to write this book in the first place?
So the book came out of post-2020, but the frameworks I've been using for many years. And what I found in kind of March, April 2020, and you, like I, would work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I was getting call after call, and people were saying—
This is like COVID.
COVID,
Okay.
it was COVID,
I think
lots
people
of going
forget
on.
that you
Yes,
were COVID.
March 2020, you've got COVID, and I was just having CEO after CEO call me and say, why me? Why now? Everything was working. That strategy we did was great. This isn't fair.
Yes.
And I had this realization. I said, you can't call yourself an entrepreneur if you can't grow your company during tough times too, right? And so I was like, we're just going to get through this by you've got to stabilize, then we're going to reset because things have changed, and then you can get back to thrive. And having that very simple but not easy playbook helped dozens and then hundreds of companies get through that. And the realization I had was that we are really bad at dealing with uncertainty. Right? We are very programmed to see the world as binary. There's frothy markets, interest rates low, cash is flowing, regulation good, and downturns.
Yes.
Recession, which can come from a COVID, a war, a macro recession.
Yes.
And so as leaders, we tend to have two playbooks.
Yes.
Growth playbook, recession-proofing playbook.
Yes.
It's like, well, what if there's another option that we can grow through any market condition if you're prepared to lead through uncertainty?
Got it.
So that's what motivated me to write the book as almost a playbook for leaders to use.
Before we dive into your book, I'm sure you did your research on all the strategies. There's like a strategy books that are a dime a dozen all the time. I've written one that's part of the dime a dozen. Why do you think we needed this book in the first place, given that so much has been written about strategy?
There's tens of thousands of books on strategy, right? But if you really think about most strategy books are focused on analyzing the situation, making a plan, executing the plan. And we have tons of how do we do scenario planning? How do we do trend analysis? How do we make a plan? How do we execute for results? OKRs, KPIs, goals, priorities, targets, tasks, like name your thing. But they don't really take uncertainty into account. And I'm going so far, Karim, as I don't even like to call them strategic plans anymore. I've actually stopped using the word plan. And the reason is, and there's parts of your business you still need planning, right? But when we hear the word plan, our brains frame as must happen, right? And strategy is going to change and going to adapt. And you need to develop it from day one, knowing this thing is going to change and adapt. And I didn't feel that there was a guidebook out there. And empirically, we saw that there wasn't. Because whenever it wasn't clearly recession or froth, leaders didn't know what to do anymore because we only had these two playbooks. So I wanted to write a book about how we take uncertainty in, not as something to manage or get through, but as a great growth opportunity to reset your business and then go back to performance.
Got it. You're talking about the plan. I'm reminded of this, my favorite Mike Tyson quote.
Yes.
Right? So, which is like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, which is like boxers. So this is what you're saying, right? Like everybody thinks they need a plan and they don't anticipate getting punched in the face. And this is like—
And I didn't make this stuff up,
make that
right?
your
I didn't make this stuff
tagline.
up. So actually where Mike Tyson got it was the Prussian war general Helmuth von Moltke. So von Moltke was actually a big part of some of the underground stuff because von Moltke was the first to rethink military strategy. Because he did the same thing. I'm going to simplify for those who have actually read his papers. He was sitting with all of his buddies one day in the tent.
You read these papers?
Yeah, I mean, I read it, but I'm assuming a lot of our other listeners haven't. What von Moltke realized, he finally called out his colleagues. He said, this is stupid. He's like, we're spending hours and hours crafting these very detailed military plans. We're spending days communicating them to our troops, because this was, of course, anything digital. And then we go to war, and the enemy makes one surprising move, and we have to start all the way over. So that quote originated from von Moltke said, no plan survives the first point of contact with the enemy. And so his whole notion was we can't give our troops detailed plans because my second favorite line was, detail is the enemy of clarity. And von Moltke's point was if we try to get more and more detailed with our troops—
the more granularity you have.
Exactly, the same for our companies today. When we overwhelm them with detail, they lose sight of the few key insights they need to move. So strategy can't just tell us what to do. It needs to tell us where we're going and why. That way people can make decisions along the way.
Great. So Rebecca, why don't you walk us through the framework that you developed, Survive, Reset, Thrive, and what the main components are, and what are some key examples you've seen in because the book is full of amazing examples of companies that have sort of been through this in different ways. So we'd love to sort of hear that from you.
Absolutely. And of course, some of the companies that are in the book. And the first thing is that middle word, reset, is the power move. And that's the difference.
Okay.
And if you think about kind of conferences, workshops, newspaper articles, the tagline always seems to be, don't just survive, thrive.
Yes.
Or you've got to survive to thrive.
Yeah.
And it misses the whole point of performance. If you're not prepared to reset or change, you're not going to thrive. We've got to reframe people from thinking just get through this and performance comes.
Okay.
The reset is the hard part. And we hate the word reset.
Yes.
Because reset, of course, means change.
Yes.
So if you think about survive, reset, thrive, the key thing is that it's a loop, not a line.
Got it.
And if you think about the few key growth frameworks that are broken through, we have the OODA loop that originated from pilots, right? We have the lean startup iteration loop. Is growth comes from loops, not lines. But our brains want us to think in linear moves, right? We think, okay, I go through this checklist, I finish all these things, and I go to these things. But survive, reset, thrive is a loop, not a line, which means you're never going to stay in one point. You're going to have to circle back through. And that was a key lesson just watching companies go through it, is that you think once I've checked off survive, I've gone through the reset, I'm all good. But another shock will come, both internal and external.
Why this fascination amongst executives and with business people about this linear thinking instead of loop thinking? Because I don't think, I mean, maybe some parts of like product development and so forth have more of this loop thinking, but this is not common sense. Like, why do you think that is?
Because if you think about the loop versus the line, we always think the future comes from a linear pathway of moving forward, right? And we have somehow associated moving forward with lines that go forward. But actually, breakthrough performance can't come from incremental adjustments, right, in the linear pathway that they're on. And these breakthrough adjustments, right, which only come, right, from when you kind of take this more loop thinking. We associate loops with going backwards. And my point is that loops are actually about going forward because you're embracing this constant cycle of resetting and changing. So you've got to reframe how you think about going through a loop as moving back to actually this is the only thing that's going to allow me to take that breakthrough growth.
So because you're like, I did reset, now I might have to go back in survive mode, or I need to go back and revisit my assumptions, that's viewed as a failure or like improper planning or I wish I had thought about things. Versus like, no, like this is just part of your strategy that should be basically continuing.
A purposeful pause is one of the most powerful things you can do as an organization. And here's one of the most minor reasons why is your employees see what's going on in the world. Your employees know that you've got to go back into that stabilized phase. And if you're ignoring that, you actually lose a lot of trust from your wider leadership team because they're the ones in the market, they're the ones talking to customers, and they're wondering why the strategy hasn't adjusted for the current reason. So there's power in the leader saying, we didn't get everything wrong. In fact, most of what we were doing is right. But the situation's changed. We're going to pause and restabilize. And when I think about stabilize, I almost always put my shoulders up. Like, this is a proactive stance, Karim, right? Survive is not reactive. It's not dealing with things that happen to you. It's saying we're going to proactively stabilize ourselves so we can take the shock as they go forward. So think about a pause and survive. But good survive is proactive survive. You do the necessary steps. So when shocks happen, either internal shocks, you lose a customer, you lose an investor, or external shocks, war, COVID, recession, surprise elections, you're ready and prepared to move on.
Great. So any examples you can give us of companies that have done this sort of proactive survive or has handled this well?
Proactive survive is tough, right? Because if you think about the construction industry, you never want to run too lean because you want to deploy all of your cash. You never want to keep extra staff, right? Because you're kind of worried about the cash drain. But it's great, there's some really, one of the biggest developers in New York, they purposely kept kind of an extra full team and a couple extra supervisors even as they were swinging, right? And that way they were able to deploy onto something else. But in Survive, I'd like to break it into two things, right? There's the basics, and then there's the power moves, because you know that I like the power moves, right? So the basics are the same playbook we all know, and they're the 4 C's: cash, cost, customers, communication.
Got it.
Now, keep your cash running, cash is king, right? Low fixed cost, clear communication, customers. But what I've found is if you just do those, you're gonna get stuck. You need to do some other moves like increasing learning velocity, strengthening employee engagement, building stronger moats around your customers.
And those are your power moves.
And only doing those power moves are you going to be able to get out of survive and move on to the reset.
Got it. Can you repeat those again, the 4 power moves?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's lots of power moves, right? My favorite is actually called repurposing and partnering.
Okay.
And in this, when there's a shock, you look at every single asset you have. Could be physical assets like plants and equipment, machines. Could be digital assets like data. Could be people. And you ask one question. Can this asset add the same amount of value to the business now as it could before the shock?
Yeah.
If not, who or what could add a value for?
Yeah.
And we had many examples in COVID. I worked with one of the Formula One teams.
Yes.
Formula One team was repurposed to make ventilators.
Yes.
One of the biggest fast fashion companies in Europe repurposed all of their employees to Tesco, the largest grocery store.
Yeah.
But you see them in non-COVID times too. And it's one of the biggest power moves you can do as a company. Before you make a capital investment decision, you say, who around us might be looking to repurpose and partner before making that investment yourself.
Got it.
And the biggest power move, though, is learning velocity. And learning velocity is the true differentiator in performance. But when we're in survive mode, we tend to get very heads down, very metric tracking, having weekly, if not daily meetings. What did we do? What do we have to do? But there's real power in asking the question, what did we learn today? What do we need to learn this week? And the companies that are heads up with the learning versus those that aren't, get out of it faster than everybody else. And then the ultimate power move is you play offense and defense at the same time.
Okay.
And one of my favorite examples was the largest zoo and amusement park in Scandinavia.
Okay.
So they have parks across Sweden and Denmark. And they especially deployed the Survive framework.
Okay.
And then mid-summer, the CEO told his team, he said, we're ready to move into reset. Like, we are in a better position than anyone else in the industry. And he realized a few weeks later, no one was doing that. They were all so emotionally drained from the survive, even with this explicit permission from the CEO.
Got it.
All of his managing directors and small country CEOs.
You mean CEO say something and nothing happens?
That would never happen, I know, to any CEOs because they were scared that it was premature to move. So what he did, and now others have followed it, which I love, is he split his team into two. He said, your survive team, your reset team.
Got it.
He said, just like on a soccer or football field, there's an offense and a defense team, and you have your own roles. He split his entire company into two teams, and they had different meetings and different huddles and different metrics. And think about that. The survive people could really work on the 4 C's, the cash and the cost, with full trust their colleagues were working on the growth.
Yeah.
And the growth team could think about how they were going to grow out of this and think about the next 2 to 3 years, knowing their colleagues were handling the survive. And that is what I've seen works the best, just because mind share is the most powerful thing in growth. If you can let someone's mind share dedicate to just that one focus, they'll move faster than others.
That's an interesting strategy. So say more about the reset. You said it's hard for companies to do reset. Why is it hard?
Test this out. We hate the word reset.
Okay.
I, at least 3 or 4 times a week, have a CEO say, I want to do Survive, Reset, Thrive. This sounds exactly what we need. I talk to my team and my board, but they just don't want to use the word reset. Can we instead use a different word, like reframe,
rename your book,
revisit, re-glance over, right? Because we're just scared of this word. Because look, change is hard, right? Change is hard for individuals. It's harder for companies. But you've got to just remove that fear of change. Now, occasionally I let them play with the words a bit, but sometimes I say no.
Now you're stuck. You got to give them the book, and they're going to say,
look at this with the assumption we might change everything. And then as soon as you give yourself the permission to change, we're not saying everything will. We're going to look at everything with such a different view to say, I'm going to challenge every assumption we had when we built this strategy, and then we're going to prepare to reset on the other end going forward. So the first step of the reset is acknowledge, right, that you might need to go into this and prepare for the change.
I think what's interesting what you're saying is that on the reset, like the biggest thing is the permission. Not that you're going to rip everything apart, but the permission to look at it and visit the assumptions. I recall in the BlackBerry iPhone transition, there was this great memo that finally leaked out of BlackBerry, which an engineer said, if you look at every single assumption that BlackBerry built, like the keyboard, the fully integrated design, the fact that they had no apps, the way they distributed their channels, there's all these assumptions baked on top of each other. And the iPhone basically turned every assumption on its head. And they weren't, at BlackBerry, prepared to convert every single assumption on its head.
Because assumptions become codified into facts.
But in fact, people don't even know that those are assumptions, right?
Because
they take it for
they've
granted.
been in assumptions, and we could go all day.
Yeah.
What was Kodak's fundamental assumption?
Yeah.
We care about the quality
got
of
it.
the photo. Think about that. And Kodak had good reason to believe that assumption. That's why they won. Because they had better quality than everyone else. And you know the story as well as I. They were prepared to shift into digital.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they had all the patents.
They had all the patents.
They invented
They had
digital.
all the resources, but they were waiting until they improved the quality. I mean, it was on the roadmap. You know, as soon as the quality gets to this level, we'll start switching over. And what do consumers do?
So
they decided they cared about the convenience over the quality.
About the quality went away.
You know, think about online dating. Newspapers should have owned online dating. Right. Go back to way before kind of our day, you know, newspapers, how did you get dates? The classical section, do you remember those? The classical sections of the back, they should own online dating. But they had an assumption the internet was always going to be this slightly non-professional, only
icky.
a few people. Icky is a good word for it, so they didn't want to touch it. And then, you know, these digital startups came and kind of took what would have been kind of their growth model out into the next stage.
Part of reset is sort of giving yourself the permission to question every assumption, but then also like doing the exercise, I think, to see what the assumptions are.
And then you're going to do the exercise. You're going to walk through and you're going to build a story. Now, there's 6 questions in the story, right? And the questions are, what's going on? And how's it going to change? And what is success? So where are we going to play? How are we going to win? What could stop us? So what should we do? So what's going on? What are the big trends shaping our industry? What do we believe to be true going forward? What's success? What's our new finish line for the next 3 years? Where are we going to play? Like, where in our market do we want to compete? How are we going to win? What is our right to win? What could stop us? And then what should we do? And that middle one, Karim, I found is the hardest part of the reset. Because I don't know what happened between all of our strategy colleagues, but we really watered down the notion of competitive advantage or differentiation, right? And if you ask most companies what it is, they say it's, you know, we're customer-centric. We have engaged
Every company
employees.
says that,
We're the most innovative. And it's the same whether you're finance or you're retail or you're fashion. But having a right to win is not a given, right? It's got to be earned. And there's a major difference between having a right to play and a right to win. So I like to ask companies 3 questions. What do you have that no one else does? What can you do that no one else can? And how can you build moats around your advantage? And at first you think these are easy questions. I don't know why she's going on about this. But then when you really break it down and say, we don't actually have very much that other companies can. There's very little we can do that others can't. And those moats we used to think we have, you know, they're no longer there. And the hardest part about it is the situation's changed. You might have used to have something that was valuable and it no longer is, or you had something that was rare, and the way our industries are changing as we look to the future, it's different. And of course, all of the data and digital and AI conversations we've had really challenge a lot of historical rights to win, right? Because how people compete in industries is just changing right before our eyes.
And how long does this reset period typically?
It's one of those annoying consultancy, it depends, right? Everything, it depends. You know, minimum a couple of weeks. I found for most companies.
That's not that long.
Yeah, most companies it is a couple of months. It's a couple of months. Now, if you're fully out of the survive, right? If you're out of survive and you're stabilized, the reset should take a couple of months. If you're spending more than a year in the reset, you moved in it too quickly, which I know sounds silly. But if you try to start resetting before the company's really stabilized, you don't have the right insights that you need. But I do.
Or you do what the zoo did, the zoo company did, which is like split up.
Or you split the team, or you split the team. But you do have to time limit the reset. Because if you give the team a year, they're going to get bogged down by the process, right? And you kind of get that analysis paralysis, and they never really feel comfortable. So a couple of months max, but you got to do some parallel pathing, right? So we're going to borrow from product development again. The thing is, once you get the insights, also move. Right? You don't need to wait until the strategy is perfect on that PowerPoint turned into a PDF and kind of on the walls, right? Think about parallel pathing. Once you find
as soon as you find the insight, just
when
go.
When you find the quick wins, like go. And another of my favorite power moves is what I call a no regret move. And a no regret move is you say, even if we got our beliefs wrong, we would still not regret making this move. Now, there's not a lot of them. But as you're building your situation assessment, you're thinking about your trends and top beliefs. If you find a move and you say, you know, even if our belief on interest rates, even if our belief on AI adoption, even if we get those beliefs wrong, this would still be a good move. Do it now, right? Don't wait until kind of the 6 months are done. Because remember, this whole thing is going to be changing and evolving. So that's a long answer. Short answer, a couple of months max.
And typically, like in the companies you worked with, who are the people doing the reset? Like, is it the CEO driving it?
Yeah, great question. You know, small teams move faster. And this is not an argue for lack of wider involvement, and shared context of your key distributed leaders is absolutely critical. But you've got to get the team down to 8 or 12, kind of 15 max to really move forward. Now, once you get towards the end of the reset, then you start bringing in the wider group of leaders to sense check your beliefs, right? To validate some of your where to play. So you're moving, kind of bring the wider team in. But you can't try to do a process with 100 people. Or you just won't make the decision. So separate kind of the decision-making from the buy-in and the feedback, and then you can move a lot faster.
And are these people working full-time on this, or are they doing it as part of their job? Like, how does it work? What have you seen?
The problem with strategy is it's never urgent, right? And we know this, right? And it's the same thing of kind of building any kind of strategy. It always feels like the second or third thing you can do that day. So it is going to be part of their jobs, but you want to have 1 or 2 leaders who've explicitly moved things off their plate so they can really do this if you want to do it well.
So a few leaders that are basically on it full time for the 2 or 3 months, and you want your best people, not your average people, right? Which is going to be a hard choice.
It's going to be a hard choice
because they're already doing important jobs inside the company. Now you're going to pull them out and focus them on this, but it sort of signals priority of this kind of a thing.
Exactly, and think about who are my 1 or 2 key leaders. Could be your chief strategy officer, it could be your chief of staff. If you're a smaller company, it could be something else. They're going to run the process, and it's their job to bring in people as needed with kind of the insights along the way.
It reminds me. I mean, I helped right during COVID. I helped our new dean think of a digital transformation strategy for the school, and of course, we do everything by committee. I said no, and we said, actually, let's set up a task force. So there was, I was on it pretty much full time, and then with a couple of the staff, and then we had a bunch of faculty come in and a lot of other admins come in to help us, make this happen. But we took 7 months instead of 2 months. But academic time. But it was actually important to be focused and just on the reset side. I think we could have used your book if you just written it.
I know, a
3
little
years
bit earlier.
In the pandemic, before the pandemic. Okay, so anything else?
Gone through the reset. The one thing about the reset as we're moving into Thrive is we're still prepared to change. So I'll tell you another silly thing that I'm doing, which is going to seem silly. Never label the strategy final. And you've seen these emails come in your inbox, right? Strategy, all caps, final. And then what happens 2 minutes later? Final V1, final V2, right? So my thing, just don't ever call it final. Because then you're framing your brains that this thing's not going to change.
Should you even call it strategy? Because that almost implies sort of this finality to it.
Yes, I'm okay with strategy as long as we know that we're building that adaptability. And now I'm not calling for chaos, right? You still need those key insights. But we're heads up that every quarter when we start reviewing it, the first question we ask is not, are we on track to plan? The first question you ask in every strategy review is, has the situation changed? Because see, if the situation's changed, being on track to plan may or may not be a good thing. But much more importantly, that's what I'm just talking about. So you can call it a strategy. Just, if you really, really want to get on my nerves, send me something labeled strategy, all final, because I'm going to send it right back.
But I think there is I think the puzzle you're outlining is what this is strategy today. You're actually causing a bunch of uncertainty, right? And you can see, as we started our conversation, we were focused on uncertainty, right? People have a difficult time dealing with uncertainty. And now you're like, well, is this a strategy or not a strategy? Like, what have you seen leaders do to sort of get people to be comfortable with iterating?
Because you want them executing. We also want them prepared to iterate. Is you need to add one more piece into your communication. We're used to communicating, hey, here's success.
Here's the grand vision.
Here's where we want to be in 3 years, and here's our top priorities. You need to add one more thing in there, your beliefs. Here's the top 5 to 6 beliefs we have. Could be macro beliefs, could be regulatory beliefs, could be kind of employee or social beliefs. What are those top 5 to 6 beliefs that those assumptions from those beliefs went into your choices? And you're saying to the wider team, these top beliefs, really no more than 10, led into these choices. And as long as these beliefs are tracking, these are our top priorities.
Got it.
But if one of these beliefs is challenged, we might change something we're doing.
I see.
And there's superpower, and Spotify, by the way, is really great at this. Spotify, before they communicate their bets, what they call their top priorities, they communicate their beliefs. And when you do that, 2 powerful things happen. 1, you've given yourself permission to change. And 2, you've recruited more testers. Because now that you've communicated to your wider team of leaders, these are our beliefs, guess what happened? Now not 10, but 100 people are being heads up in the market looking to see if those beliefs are validated. So what sounds super hard, like, oh, we've got to build change and it might change, I'm trying to make it simple. You say, these are the beliefs, because of these beliefs, these are our choices, but if and when these beliefs get challenged, prepared that we might change one of these choices. Now, because companies change all the time when the situation changes, they just don't communicate it.
Yeah. No, but I think what you're also offering, what I'm sort of taking from this, we actually have to teach our teams how to be sort of this flexible and agile around this heavy word of strategy. And so you're saying, look, start with the beliefs and then come up with your recommendations and the actions you're going to take. But the beliefs are can be updated.
Yes.
And so then the heaviness around strategy, don't change the strategy, can then go away, because if the beliefs change, we will change the actions we'll take, instead of like, oh my goodness, the strategy was wrong.
And on the other hand, when the beliefs remain affirmed and validated, then
you can keep going.
We're going to keep executing just as we are. And that's a big part of moving from the reset onto the thrive. Is the beliefs are communicated and you've started testing them. Because you're going to get feedback on whether or not your beliefs are valid way before you get feedback from the market on if your priorities are getting results. So a big part of that transition from the reset to thrive is that. And it's building what I call internal predictability. Now, it's not a sexy phrase, I know, right? But internal predictability means, hey, we're going to build a company that even as the outside world around us changes, my team inside knows how to react when it does.
Got it.
And you've got internal predictability when 4 things are true, okay? Everyone on the team can say, I know what we're trying to achieve and why it matters. I know where decisions take place. I can rely on others to do what they say they will do. And if I do adapt, it's recognized and rewarded. And if your wider team can say yes to those 4 questions, I'm very confident you can move from the reset onto the thrive.
So tell us about thrive.
I know everyone wants to start with thrive.
I don't mean thriving. Yes, exactly.
I know. And what I wanted to do, and the publisher wouldn't let me, is I wanted to take the thrive chapters out. And you had to like send an email in promising that you'd read the survive and the reset, because the entrepreneurs always want to read that, right?
I love that.
And people said, well,
Go to the end of the book
I'll read this later, but just like, can I read that chapter first? And the answer is no, right? Because you've got to do the hard work to get to thrive. Thrive is about executing with agility and learning. And those sound like cliche words, but that's really it. We've got this agility. We're making good decisions quickly, aligned with strategy, and we're always learning. The number one differentiator I find in doing this for over 15 years is learning velocity is it. Companies that learn faster grow faster. That is the number one defining characteristic that sets Thrive companies apart from those that don't. They just learn faster.
But if you ask any CEO, can I be skeptical? Like, if you ask any CEO, like, of course we're a learning organization. That was like invented, in the last century. What's the difference between I'm a learning organization to this notion of learning velocity, and then what are the practices for it?
So my question always back is, are you a learning organization or a teaching organization? Do you like sharing PowerPoints with each other, communicating about what you did? Do you like going to, business schools, some of the great ones we're around right now, and learning and development courses? That's being a teaching organization. Great, but incomplete for being a learning organization. Being a learning organization is about identifying the most critical learning loops in your company. And we're coming back to the loops, right? So think about any repeatable activity that you do. Think about yourself. You launch a new course, right? You recruit a new partner to the business school. In a company, you develop and launch a new product. You open a new market. These are learning loops. And learning organizations have identified all of the steps of that loop, and they're obsessed with accelerating how quickly they move across that loop so they can do it better than anyone else. And that's how you build that right to win. So it's about this active learning in the market and always being heads up for those learning opportunities. I work with many companies who claim they're a learning organization, but they haven't identified learning loops. They don't really do experimentation. It's just all about sharing PowerPoints and videos with each other about sharing what we've done.
Any best practices or any organizations that stand out for you that are really good at this learning velocity concept?
Several of them. Zara, the fast fashion company, I mean, they really pioneered some of this when it came from taking something that was happening on the runway down to the stores. And they've continued to iterate even as the industry has digitized. WD-40, which you think some people don't even know it's a company, right? But I mean, the can, we all know the story. It came from the 40th try of that invention, right? They're also obsessed with this concept of learning velocity and trying to cycle all of the loops when it comes to opening new markets, to sharing across
I just saw a new fragrance by WD-40 fragrance.
Yes, and That's another great example. So how that happened is they didn't invent it in their R&D lab.
Yeah.
They had an influencer, France, who was playing around with it. They picked it up on the social channels. They jumped on it and innovated from that and actually launched something successful from it. Yes. Now, you and I might not want to wear WD-40 fragrance.
No, I don't think so.
But I can't tell you how much traction that thing has gotten so far.
Yeah. Let me bring you back to my hobby horse and what we do at the Institute, which is like thinking a lot about how AI is impacting the world. How do we think about AI in this framework?
AI is just the most powerful thing in this framework for this reason, Karim. And I've been thinking about this for a couple years, as you and I have talked about. AI is the first example of something that companies are forced to do a reset, but they didn't need to stop and survive. And I'm using some jargon, so let's say what I mean. When we cycle through this loop, we usually have a shock that tells us pause.
Right.
We have a COVID, we have a war, we have a recession, we have a surprise election, right, which has happened in the US and UK recently.
Or like competition comes
in, you know, a major investor pulls out if you're still in the growth stages, and you realize as a team, wow, like we've got to reassess.
Yes.
And then you naturally go into the reset. But what happens when you never had a shock, either internal or external, and things are going well, right? And that's what AI is doing. AI is fundamentally disrupting both how we work and what we work on in the industries in which we compete, as you know. And most companies who need to do the most are currently doing well. They're getting, you know, banger earnings results. Their employees are more engaged than ever. And so they're saying, why would I even think about a reset? When
and I can wait 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
The phrase I hear consistently is, AI is still the wild, wild west. You know, we'll just wait. We'll just wait until we learn more. Let's go in kind of the wait and see mode. And there's sometimes power in doing this purposeful waiting, but only when you're parallel pathing with some testing and some learning and some iteration. So AI is a forced reset, and the companies that step up and take it are going to be the ones that get ahead. And the ones that go into this holding pattern of wait and see for a full cycle, you know, 3 years down, are going to be dramatically behind by the time that we get there.
One of the things I'm actually seeing, which I love your reflection on, is that we know, like, to do the AI transformation, you need to fix your data, you got to fix your infrastructure, your architecture, right? And that this movement from that to that takes some time and investment and so forth. So that's been going on, and there's, with increasing, you know, everybody goes to Davos, gets excited, wants to do that. But then there is this thing that these generative AI tools are being released in the wild, right? Microsoft Copilot, Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, and they're like $20 a month. $30 a month. Either people get them personally or people get them through their accounts. And so there's this mismatch of transformation work that companies need to do, and then these tools becoming available that have ready-made use cases now, like in marketing or in pricing or in software development and so forth. So how do we sort of take this as a reset moment instead of like let's do large cycles of planning to get all these things done? Like what would you recommend CEOs do around this?
My bias is always,
leader,
my bias is always for action with insights, right? So you're taking action, but you're not kind of throwing things there. So we're going to come back to parallel pathing. Right? I think there is a need and a time for the playing and the exploration and the learning and letting employees just get their hands dirty, for lack of a better word. Because if you keep employees back, and I'm seeing many big companies that you and I name, and these we can't name, saying, you know, putting out so much governance, no one's just touching anything.
The first move is hire a chief governance officer.
Yes. So there is a need for that, but you can't stay in just play around mode for too long. So what I like to do is, one, we're going to go back to the strategy, right? And look through your strategic priorities that you developed in the reset, whether that was 6 months ago or 2 years ago. And in each one, try to identify the key opportunities from AI, right? And so start with your strategy. You did the work of figuring out how you create value, because AI doesn't change that strategy is value creation. AI changes the acceleration, support, and enablement. So parallel pathing. You've got to do the foundational work of your tech and data and platform. But if you're doing that in a linear, rather than kind of this parallel pathing, you are going to get it maybe ready, and it goes back to very similar to survive. You're never going to feel like it's ready to move. And you're going to lose your good employees in the meantime, because they're going to want to go to a company that they feel is moving faster and innovating. And second, right, you're going to be a full cycle behind by the time that you get it there. So I like to bucket everything into just 3 easy buckets. Quick wins. Do it now, get something now, impact might be limited. Conventional, but takes effort. It's not a sexy phrase, but what I mean is, our whole industry is probably working on this use case.
Yes.
It's going to take effort,
Yes.
but I know the impact's going to be there. But let's not kid ourselves we're differentiating.
Got it.
And then the possible moonshots.
Got it.
And I like to bucket some AI opportunities and use cases in all three of those buckets while we're parallel pathing the back-end tech and platform and data.
Got it.
And you and I both know that a lot of companies actually overestimate how much differentiation their current data is, right?
100%.
And so what I'm seeing is people are waiting so long because they're convinced that their asset is their data. There's gold.
Yeah.
And until we find the gold, let's not start moving. And my point is, let's start moving. Because if you don't build the capability, even in that small, statistically unlikely chance you have gold in that data, your employees don't have the capability to do anything with it.
In fact, I think there's many companies with asbestos instead of gold. And
I know.
They just don't know.
Yes. But they're convinced until they do all of the work, they won't know. They won't know.
So what's so imagine some company comes to you that has not had the chance to do SRT before, or has even developed a strategy. And they come to you and say, okay, I want the AI playbook. Rebecca, what would you tell them how to start?
Well, first read Karim's book, and then read Rebecca's book, of course. Yes. And then after you do that, assuming you don't have strategic priorities, which is always where I'd like them to start, you start with your value chain. I know like I'm being business school professor right now, but bear with me. This really is the easiest way. So your value chain is this series of activities you have as a company that allow you to create value, right? It's every big chunk of activity that allows you to create value. So you sit down with your team, you map out your value chain, and you go through each step of the value chain and say, where are AI opportunities that allow us to increase client willingness to pay?
Got it.
Where are AI opportunities that will fundamentally decrease our cost? And in each step of the value chain, identify between 3 and 5 opportunities, then prioritize them by the effort it will take and the possible impact, and then start moving. So you can do it.
Yes. And that's part of the reset. That's part of the reset.
And I'm saying you can do it in parallel to the reset. You could do it without having done a reset, though that's not what either of us would recommend. But your value creation value chain, those old strategy tools that have been around since before Porter's days, kind of walking the halls that we're on, those are still your go-to starting points for AI. And that's what I keep coming back to. AI changes a lot, but it doesn't change the notion of value creation
and value capture,
being what we need to do. Value creation, value capture. Value creation, value chain.
If I push you back and say, okay, like show me what's your playbook for the AI reset, right? And so how would you? And what I think it might be, and let me think out with you, right? Like so, imagine you said we're going to do AI reset in the company, right? We're going to sort of think about every single assumption we have about what makes our value chain work, and then say, do those assumptions hold? Do we need new assumptions? Do we need new beliefs, right? And what are the beliefs that we now need to create that are that have an AI shadow in them?
We're going to start with our beliefs. We're going to start with our beliefs because most leadership teams are not aligned on their beliefs about AI, right? And so you've got to force that sometimes difficult conversation first, because if you're not aligned as a team on your beliefs around AI, you won't align on any choice that follows.
I see such heterogeneity amongst executives about the beliefs, right? Lots of differences about the beliefs about these tools and what they can do.
And so we start with our beliefs. Where do we believe it will go in terms of regulation? Where do we believe it will go in terms of our customers? Where do we believe as far as how our industry is structured and shaped and will compete? And I find they can almost get there on how it's going to change current competition. It's very difficult to come up with beliefs of how it might be disrupted, but we start with our beliefs. Once you've done the beliefs, you go back to differentiation, our right to win. How does AI in our industry change our right to win? And change doesn't always mean worsen. Again, our brains are framed that AI is going to weaken our competitive advantage, but my push is, how can it strengthen it? Right? Where can you carve out this differentiation? So those same questions we walked through earlier, what's going on and how's it going to change? What is success? Where are we going to play? How are we going to win? What could stop us? So what should we do? Great news, same questions. You're going to walk through them again, starting with those beliefs. And you might need to leave the time, which could be a few weeks, to align on some of those beliefs. Now, the biggest pushback I'm sure both of us are going to get is we don't know. We're just guessing. Put something down, because as soon as you've written a belief down, now you can start testing it.
And of course, part of this model is that you want to always be updating your beliefs.
Yes, all the time.
Right? Be a Bayesianist about it. Right? Always update your beliefs along the way. So Rebecca, amazing conversation. We loved it. What's your final message to our audience of leaders that are thinking about technology, thinking about their business, thinking about their organizations, and how the SRT or the Survive, Reset, Thrive book can help them succeed.
True entrepreneurs, Karim, they don't just want to compete in the future. They want to invent the future, right? And you need to look at your playbook differently if you want to do that. You know, incremental tinkering with a current growth plan is not going to make you an inventor, right? It's going to make you a doer, right? And so there's power in embracing the loop of, I'm going to go through a stabilized phase. I'm going to reset when and as needed and be prepared to change. And then I can take my organization back to thrive, where I'm going to constantly build a capability of agility and learning. And if I think about what AI does, learning is going to be the biggest differentiator in the AI wars as well. Everything else is very quickly becoming commoditized. Opportunities and use cases, they exist for everyone in the industry. Data, if it's publicly available data sets, by definition, we all have them, right? There's very little, if you think about the tech stack that creates AI, outside of the learning loops. The more quickly your organization can learn and embed and share and use it to iterate next time, learning's going to be the biggest differentiator there, just as it was in the classic Survive, Reset, Thrive model.
Fabulous. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
No, thank you,
really, really great to have our conversation. And the book is available everywhere.
The book is available, yes, everywhere you buy books.
Everywhere you buy books. Books are available everywhere online. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Karim.
Thanks for joining us.